Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Show your support by visiting US Modernist massive mid-century modern archives at USModernist.org. Back in 1948, no architect was more famous, admired, or despised than the modernist Frank Lloyd Wright. He polarized America with a combination of brilliance and arrogance. It's no surprise then that most U.S. universities were very slow to embrace the growing modernist movement, until NC State University stepped up its game. If there was a movie about it, it would sound like this.
In a world of classical design, there was one man, one school, one decision, one desire. He knew too much. He went too far. Coming in the fall of 1948, one dean brings the bright promise of modernism to a town in North Carolina. Henry Kamphoefner is the Modernator.
Well done, Tom.
Thank you.
Although Kamphoefner, it says here, the founding dean of the School of Design at NC State University, died in 1990, his impact on thousands of careers and tens of thousands of buildings lives on. Today, US Modernist Radio welcomes former students, old friends, and respected colleagues Abie Harris, Roger Clark, Ben Taylor, and Jerzy Główczewski. And now, the host of Art Vandelay's favorite podcast, George Smart.
Hey, thank you, Tom. I'm George Smart, and welcome to the show. By the way, the name Art Vandelay comes from several episodes of Seinfeld,
yes,
where George Costanza makes up things to impress women and potential employers. Last year, there actually was a guy in New York State who was tried and jailed for impersonating an architect, the first one I've ever heard on this crime. We are trying to get him for the show, but it's not a fast process communicating to a prisoner. We wait by the mailbox.
Yes.
But I digress. Support for U.S. Modernist Radio comes from Realtor Angela Roll. In an adventure we are largely making up, modernist realtor Angela Roll dated Harry Potter at 17 as she attended Le Corbusier High School just down the road from Hogwarts. I think their football team was the Fighting Modernists. Although ridiculed by other architecture students for dating a magician, she learned how to conjure up the slightly tipsy ghost of Mies van der Rohe and aced all the exams, becoming valedictorian.
Wow.
After she and Harry broke up, Angela was recruited by the CIA and sent to rural Georgia to design secret underground bunkers disguised as Waffle Houses. Yes, the conspiracy theories are true. On a tip from former President Jimmy Carter, who likes his hash browns scattered, smothered, covered, chunked, and topped, she traveled to Paris as a bookseller of architecture novels on the right bank, a perfect cover for observing the Russian consulate just across the street. One night, kidnapped by Putin's cowboy brother, Rootin' Tootin' Putin, she was rescued by international man of mystery Eric of Brussels, whom she later married. On their wedding night along the Champs-Élysées, there was a street riot, started by Putin's other gangster brother, Lootin' Shootin' Putin. And Eric and Angela narrowly escaped into the Seine via her speedboat, because all heroines have one, to become a formidable real estate agent with architecture training, capable of brilliant advice to buyers and sellers of modernist houses. Angela Roll is your special agent. Reach her at angelaroll.com, that's ROEHL, or 919-995-0550.
I knew next to none of that.
Well, the facts just keep rolling out about her every week. I don't know where they come from. If you were an architecture student in the 1950s and 60s, there was one school in the South everyone wanted to attend, North Carolina State University. Its dean, Henry Kamphoefner, was a rock star of modernist architecture. He was recruited from Oklahoma to essentially start a new school of design from scratch, and that he did. He was appointed the first dean of the School of Design at NC State and quickly elevated the school from obscurity to national prominence. A passionate modernist, Kamphoefner's changes were fast and effective. By 1950, Frank Lloyd Wright himself visited the school and stayed in Henry's modernist house. Just 2 years before his death in 1990, Kamphoefner bitterly acknowledged modernism's fall, lamenting that prominent architects were, and I quote, selling out for a neo-modernistic populism, end quote, and that the famous maxim of Louis Sullivan, form follows function, was replaced by form follows money.
Amen, brother.
Thank you. Kamphoefner had an unparalleled impact on the architecture of North Carolina. Just before he died, the School of Design named a building, Kamphoefner Hall, after him. It was designed by our past podcast guest, Harry Wolff. Joining us today are students and friends and colleagues of Henry's. Architect Jerzy Główczewski was born in 1922 in Warsaw, Poland. He fought during the war and was recruited by Kamphoefner as a professor in the early 60s. He is the author of The Warrior by Accident, Nonetheless, The Optimist, and My America, Yes or No. Welcome, Jerzy.
Yes, hi.
Glad to have you on the show.
Okay.
Architect Ben Taylor graduated from the NC State School of Design in 1958 and later taught there. He founded Envirotech with Bob Burns and our next guest, Abie Harris, and practiced architecture there for 32 years. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you.
We have architect and artist Abie Harris, who studied with Henry Kamphoefner, then became director of campus planning for all of NC State. Hi, Abie.
Hello, George.
And finally, Professor Roger Clark, who taught at NC State and literally wrote the book. Right here.
Oh, he's opening
I'm
it up.
holding it in my hand, The School of Design, the Kamphoefner Years, 1948 to 1973. Hi, Roger.
Hi, George. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, Roger, let's start with you, since you're our historian in all of this. Why was Henry chosen to start this new school, whereas before it was just an architectural engineering program of no particular significance?
To the best of my knowledge, he was chosen to form a new school because he had been an outstanding educator in Oklahoma, and that he would form this new school. I do know that he was chosen to begin a new school as a result of a decision by the university and by the state to combine a faltering architectural engineering program and a landscape program that were in the College of Engineering in one case and the College of Horticulture in the other case. So there was a desire, I think, on the part of many of the local architects to, in fact, have a school of architecture that would, in fact, create a desire for design excellence in the state.
Now, when Kamphoefner arrived in Raleigh, he made a lot of changes. What did he do?
Well, first of all, it was a brand new school, and he presented to the university some demands. Some of the demands were to get rid of previous faculty members he thought
So step one, drain the swamp?
Drain the swamp, that's correct.
Okay.
And that he brought with him a series of faculty, some of whom were with him when he was in Oklahoma, some of whom came from other places. But he created 6 new positions in the school and literally brought a whole new faculty to the university.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't let deans do that anymore, do they? Just come in and sack the faculty and bring in your own recruits directly from around the country? You have to have committees and meetings and selection processes, and HR gets involved and all of that, right?
That's correct. To the best of my knowledge, I can't think of any other place that has done that, no.
I just can't go out and pluck people out as a new dean for my school.
No, you cannot.
Okay. Abie and Ben, who were some of the faculty that you heard about that when you got to the school later on in the 50s, there was this kind of whole romance about it? I mean, the school had been percolating along by then and doing really well. Who were some of the faculty you interacted with that had been there a while?
Well, in 1950, the president of MIT, I was in Detroit with a model car competition. I asked him where I should go to school. And he says, "Where are you from?" I said, "North Carolina." He says, "There's only one place for you to go to school, and that's Henry Kamphoefner School." And so I went down and asked Henry about studying products design, because that's where I've been designing automobiles. And Henry said, in 2 years, I'll have a products design school for you. And 2 years after I graduated, he did. But I'm glad I'm in architecture.
Okay. So, Jerzy, let's check in with you. We have you on a phone from your home. Tell us about how you met Henry Kamphoefner and how he recruited you to the school.
I studied architecture. I began in 1947 in the School of Architecture in Warsaw. And if you know, Warsaw was totally destroyed by the Germans.
Yes.
And all of us who were studying at the same time, we were working on reconstruction, on rebuilding the old city and design a contemporary city. These are the two slightly different approaches, the modern architecture and the ancient architecture, all at the same time. So when I came to America on a Ford Foundation grant in 1951, I believe, I was invited to this big event for the American Institute of Architects in Philadelphia, who was celebrating the project of rebuilding old Philadelphia Center and using the modern techniques of planning, which was something that I was known to do during my 8 years of work as an architect in Poland. And that's why I got to know Henry, because I was introduced to him and we found a common interest. And that's how it started.
When did you come down to Raleigh?
I came to America for 5 months to tour America from top to bottom. But on the advice of Henry, he suggested that I come at the end of my tour, which would be in August. But I came to Raleigh on my way back to New York. I was driving, by the way. So then Henry got me extremely interested by showing the school and what they were doing. And I met some students who were very disappointed about the turn that the school took during that year, probably. They did not like the teacher who was teaching them. So that's where I started.
So you were the replacement?
I did not know yet. I stayed 2 days in Raleigh. On the second day, Henry and his assistant or his advisor, Duncan Stewart, invited me to the Students' Union for a lunch. And during that time, they offered me a position starting in the winter, the second
semester.
I'm sorry. And I said, well, I never thought before. He said, never mind, you will be doing fine. But I said, all right, but I have to go first back home because we are not given free travel. I have to report what I have seen, and you have to make all the arrangements for me to come to America again. He did all that. And in February, I landed up in New York and flew to Raleigh for 1 semester only.
Okay.
Because I did not know whether I would be able to teach students because I never done this before.
Henry Kamphoefner was very entrepreneurial in this regard.
He was very, yes.
He would hire several people who had not had formal teaching experience, right?
I understand, but I did not know at that time, and I was very sort of nervous about the situation.
Abie, do you know of any other people that he recruited that weren't formal professors?
I don't remember any others that came directly into teaching. Of course, I did. When I started teaching there, I had not taught before.
Well, there was Matthew Nowitzki, first of all.
Yeah.
Right. Matthew Nowitzki, who was a key recruit for the school and died tragically in 1950 in Egypt. Did you know Matthew in Poland before that?
I did not know him, but I knew about him because our family, before it was nationalized by the communist government, before the war and before the World War I, had a lithography of printed material. And among them, my father introduced the modern posters.
Oh, right.
There are about 23 posters printed in our lithography at the Museum of Lithography in Warsaw. But, that was the background of that. Anyway, I remember my mother, who was running this before and during the war and before the war, that there was this young architect who was studying in Warsaw, and he was very good at posters, at design of posters, especially his wife.
Sasha,
which is a nickname.
Right. She just passed away recently at 105.
Yes,
wow.
yes. And I did not meet them, but I knew about them before the war, and I knew before I came on this Ford Foundation grant that there was this Matthew Nowicki teaching in Raleigh.
Gentlemen, tell me some of your favorite Henry Kamphoefner stories, because there are legions of these. Who would like to go first?
After a few years, I ended up in Italy, and a little community of Tirrenia between Pisa and Livorno. And Henry was staying with Mabel at California Motel in Pisa. And so, of course, we invited Henry and Mabel over for dinner while they were visiting Europe. And we had been out and bought some very good wine. We paid as much as 50 cents a bottle for some good wine, because we usually only paid about 10 to 15 cents for a bottle of wine. And so we were loaded with high-quality wine, and Henry and Mabel came in, and somehow or other, Henry saw what was in the refrigerator. We had some milk. Well, of course, at that time, milk had anthrax everywhere but in Holland, and Henry had not been able to find milk anywhere that he could drink. So he drank all of our milk.
Instead of the wine?
Instead of wine. No wine.
No wine.
No wine.
He has priorities.
Right.
Was Kamphoefner warmly received by the school, by its faculty, by the university when he started raising its prominence?
We were, kids.
I know how old you were, Ben. I'm just trying to throw this out as a general question.
The newspaper didn't like him. The local press.
Tell us about his relationship with the local press.
Well, I can't remember a good example where I remember it happening, but...
Well, Henry was critical of anything that wasn't modern being built in Raleigh and in the state. I remember in 1952 when Wake Forest built their new campus in Winston-Salem, he was very critical of that and received a lot of flack. I think that's when animosity began between him and certain factions of the press. And he was very critical of local architecture. One of the famous local was the Carolina Country Club that had originally been designed by, it was a modern building designed by Dietrich, I think.
By Nowicki and Milton Small.
Yes.
Nowicki worked on that.
Small was the architect of record.
That's right.
And, of course, that was later on, and he was, I don't know who the subsequent architect was, but it was described as French country. French country, yeah.
Right.
And Henry blasted that, but he kept an ongoing dialogue in the press about what was going on architecturally.
Kamphoefner had an interesting relationship with Edward Durrell Stone, who did two key buildings in the area, our legislative building in Raleigh downtown, and what was then, back in the 70s, the new Museum of Art. Can you tell us a little bit about his feelings on Stone?
You've heard that legendary story.
Tell us that story, because I know it, but I want you to share it.
There at some AIA convention probably, and Stone was descending the escalator similar to the way Donald Trump came to announce his presidency. No, Henry had been very critical of Stone, and Stone observed to a colleague, Henry was coming down the stairs, that's what it was, and he said, there are three things in the world that are overrated: alcohol, sex, and Henry Kamphoefner. That's the way I remember the story.
Yes, I believe the direct quote is, "You know there are three things in this world that are overrated: architecture, f***ing, and Henry Kamphoefner." There was dead silence, and the host turned to Kamphoefner and dryly said, "Well, Henry, you're in good company." When Henry came to Raleigh, he really put the school on a meteoric path to success and recognition. By 1950, as we mentioned earlier, Frank Lloyd Wright came to town, did a lecture on campus, which at the time was the most well-attended lecture of anywhere in the country. About 5,000 people came to that lecture in a town, Raleigh, that had maybe 90,000 or 100,000 people total at the time. So that's 5% of your population going to one event. What was it like for sleepy old Raleigh at the time? How did Raleigh receive Henry and his wave of modernism coming into town?
I don't think any of us were there in 1950. Ben and I got here in 1952. We had heard about it, and that the story that I remember about it, that he was scheduled to speak in Pullen Hall, I think, which later burned down at the hands of an arsonist. But I think he ended up
He spoke at Reynolds Coliseum that had just been completed.
Yes. Share with me what you liked or admired or didn't like about Henry.
Well, go back to Frank Lloyd Wright. I think put the School of Design on the map. I think that his influence in what was going on in the studios was minimal. And I think that the new faculty there had a much more profound influence on us than Frank Lloyd Wright. I think my friend Bob Burns perhaps was more influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright than any other student that I know of. But I think that it was more the publicity generated by that rather than the ideas or the concepts. It was much more grounded in what Matthew Nowitzki brought originally to the school and then carried on by Catalano and Caminos and other. I think that's where the whole structural emphasis, the integration of structure and architecture, was more grounded in that than in Frank Lloyd Wright.
And who were some of the faculty that Kamphoefner brought in that were exciting to learn from?
Well, I think that in my freshman year, Roy Gusso, who I think that was the first year he had taught, was right straight out of the Bauhaus curriculum. And then also my freshman year, Jim Fitzgibbon, who had come with Henry from Oklahoma, taught a structures course. And that, again, laid a foundation, certainly in me, of the importance of structure and design. And I can't remember the painters, Duncan Stewart, Joe Cox. Well, Duncan came with Henry, of course. I didn't have him my freshman year, but...
You had Duncan second year too, didn't you? I had Duncan.
I only had Duncan for what was called descriptive drawing or painting.
I had Duncan for design my second year. Gusso, I was with Abie the freshman year in the class with Gusso. And third year, when we got to Vernon Sjogren, I was especially impressed with Vernon. A lot of people didn't like Vernon. He was a little bit unusual lifestyle. But
was he naked all the time, or what did he do, Ben?
No, he was a little bit gay in terms of his activity. And
okay, which was pretty unusual for that time.
That's right, and some of us young kids didn't know much about it.
Okay,
but we were able to deal with it.
All right.
And when Henry was in Europe and we were talking, Vernon had left the school, and I talked him into bringing him back to the school. I said it was a good experience. We had third year with Vernon. He had some good people that were well known. The lecture series are names that were really Mies and
Richard Neutra.
Gropius was there, and we were all kind of impressed. But we were ready for this. We came to the School of Design to learn what this new stuff was all about. We were having a great deal of fun.
Well, this was the heyday of a lot of modernism throughout the United States.
Absolutely.
But not everybody was taking to it like NC State's campus. Roger, what do you think made Henry so successful? What was his personality like?
I think that he was persuasive. He was outgoing. He often liked to talk about the fact that he was not the sun, but was the moon, and that other people made him shine. Although there are times that I can tell you that, at least in my experience, he was very forceful. He knew what he thought was appropriate, and he expected the faculty and students to perform at the level that he expected, which I think was terribly important relative to his maintaining a school. It's one thing to start a school. It's a little bit easier to start something brand new. It is maintaining it for a period of years that I think is the more difficult task. He was open in terms of being interested in a lot of different things. That is to say, he brought visitors to the school that rivaled visitors at any other school that I know of, and maybe surpassed. A very impressive list. It is said that other than Le Corbusier and Alto, that all of the important people in the whole world of design came to the school at one point or another. Many came back many times. Buckminster Fuller came several times, for instance. And the visitors often would not just come, as they often do in today's world, of coming and giving a lecture and then leaving, but in fact they would come and stay for a period of time.
They would hang out with the students.
They would hang with the students, but the school made provisions for them to stay and teach very often, so that they altered the normal schedule and so on and so forth.
How long would they stay?
Well, some of them stayed for whole semesters. Some of them stayed for weeks at a time.
Buckminster Fuller stayed, I think, for a full year.
Yes.
If not more.
Yeah.
And I remember lectures that went into 2 o'clock in the morning, and the room was full at wherever we were having those lectures.
Bucky Fuller could talk. I mean, he could talk and talk and talk and talk.
I remember after working on one of his geodesic domes, we took polyester and fiberglass and cardboard frames and made a dome. And I got my hands stuck together, and I had to literally pull the skin off to get my hands apart. And I had to recover for a while with that. That was not a great experience for me, Larry, but I had fun doing it. So
that's devotion to your craft, Ben.
Yeah, that's right.
What grade did you get for sticking your hands together?
I don't remember that anything I did with Fuller was graded. We all participated in what he was doing, and it was kind of a group of students who wanted to do that with him.
If I remember correctly, he came 6 or 7 times. He didn't just come one time, for instance.
Yeah.
He established a business here, Synergetics, right?
With T.C. and
T.C. Howard.
Yeah.
And Fitzgibbons was involved.
That's right. Fitzgibbons.
Jim Fitzgibbons was the person who actually brought Bucky Fuller here first, I think.
Right.
Abie, let me ask you, you were director of campus planning for NC State and later the university architect. During the time when Kamphoefner was dean, as well as after he retired, was it easy to get along with Henry in that role?
Sure, he was very supportive. In fact, he actually got me the job there because he had convinced Chancellor John T. Caldwell that it was time to do something about the architecture on campus. And as a result, I was hired to do that, part-time in the campus planning office and part-time teaching in the design school. But he was very, very, very supportive.
And were there any particular buildings he really tried to get erected on the campus that came to fruition?
No, he wasn't directly involved in that. His influence was not that focused. I mean,
he put people in place, and then he found the right people.
Okay.
That was his method.
Now, one of the things I read a lot about Kamphoefner that he did that contributed to the huge number of houses that we have in this area that are modern is that he wanted faculty and even students to go out and get their own clients and be in the practice of architecture as well as the study of architecture. We have 800 modernist homes within 20 miles of this spot because of that policy, which is no longer in place today because people are scared of liability and so forth. But at the time, that was a brilliant stroke. Do you know some of the other things that he did during that time that helped elevate the school?
He was very supportive of the local architects who were on his team. If you were not one of the modernist disciples, I don't know that he would talk to you. But we had a large number of people who were really trying to do some modern buildings in the architectural profession. It was a healthy situation. We didn't always be able to deliver in the climate that we were in with the quality that we would like, but we were able to pursue it.
Well, Henry also referred faculty members to clients for projects. For instance, the Dorton Arena that Nowitzki designed was a result of the state coming to him and asking him for advice as to who might do a new building on the fairgrounds. And I'm of the impression that many other buildings were the result of faculty members working with other firms in the area, with Matsumoto, for instance, with Milton Small on projects.
Okay.
Henry, for instance, there is a famous, reasonably well-known instance in which a faculty member, Henry told the faculty member that he expected them to practice, and the faculty member retort was, "If I can't practice, I won't teach." So there was a real strong encouragement for the faculty to be involved in either teaching or in painting or sculpture, if that's what they were doing, or landscape architecture, if that's what they were doing. So there was a real tie between the profession and the faculty, which I think is very important.
It was important that he had the faculty out doing architecture because the architects prior to the School of Design were not trained to do modern architecture. So consequently, he didn't have a corps of existing architects in town doing stuff that he wanted to see done. So moving his faculty out into the mainstream of design, and it was mostly residential, that they were able to do that and to do the examples in what you say we're third in the nation as far as modernist homes.
He was also very encouraging of the faculty and students, too, to do design competitions. Yeah. Back then in the 50s and 60s, I think the faculty entered and won a lot of design competitions as well as the students. Henry kept a list of the dollar volume that the students and faculty had won in various competitions. He was very proud of that.
He tried to add my winnings when I was in high school to the list of school design. I said, that's all right with me. I don't have a problem with that.
Well, modernism fell out of favor in the 1970s, and with it, Kamphoefner was forced to retire. He stayed on at the school to teach part-time and was eventually named Dean Emeritus. But eventually, there were some conflicts, right, Roger, between him and the new dean, Claude McKinney?
Yes.
And he lost his teaching position and retired fully. That must have been hard on both of them, both the new dean coming in after this legendary person and also Henry, who was trying to hold on to things.
Well, first of all, Henry was no longer dean because he had turned 65, and it was a university policy that you could no longer be an administrator in an administrative position after 65. And so he, in quotes, retired because he had no choice in terms of being the dean of the school. Yes, it was difficult for the new dean to come in and try to think of things differently and literally have Henry Kamphoefner around, so to speak. And Henry, I think, would not have retired as the dean if it had not been for the rule that he could no longer be dean because of his age. The issue was really that Henry wanted to teach the modern history course, and that was difficult for Henry to continue to do because Henry, and to the best of my knowledge, the students weren't very happy with eventually with Henry teaching that course because Henry would really tell stories rather than teaching the history course.
Because he had lived in history, pretty much.
Yeah, he had. That's correct. But he would tell stories about Frank Lloyd Wright rather than, let's say, studying Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture. He would tell stories, and I remember that the students were not very happy with Henry, and eventually, I don't know the ins and outs, but eventually Henry no longer was teaching. He did teach at Meredith College for
Briefly,
a couple
yes.
years,
Yes.
But he was no longer on the faculty as such.
The Kamphoefner legacy lives on. Henry and his wife, Mabel, established an ongoing prize for career achievement in North Carolina modernist architecture called the Kamphoefner Prize. He said this when he was setting it up. The donors and this selection committee for this award anticipates the chosen architect has demonstrated a consistent integrity and devotion over an acceptable period of time to further the modern movement in architecture, without yielding to any of the undesirable current cliches, neo-modernistic mannerisms, or artless historicism that have flawed the building culture of today. He told it like it was, huh?
Absolutely. That is absolute fact that he told it like it was. I don't think it's ever a minced word in his brain.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today here in the studio. It's a real pleasure to have you here. I know you all personally, and it's great to have you come in and talk about Henry.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for doing it.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for listening, folks. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special agent for Modernist Houses, 919-995-0550. And you can visit USModernist.org to listen to past shows and discover our massive mid-century modernist archives. US Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Cindy Stratton, not her real name, researches our guests from a secret underground bunker very close to Whole Foods. US Modernist Radio is a production of Triangle Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational organization for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. Remember, friends don't let friends build Italianate McMansions that aren't in Italy. George and Frank and I will be back in 2 weeks with another rootin', tootin', hootin', shootin', lootin', pootin' edition of US Modernist Radio.
Thank you, Tom.